Good afternoon, everybody. This is Nathaniel Provencio, and as always, my very good friend Dr. Worcester. What's up, my man?
What's up, Nathaniel? Good to see you, pal.
Man, I'm pretty good. I'm glad we got more than just one person on this show because, research says that collectively, collective teacher efficacy, I don't know about collector podcast efficacy, that's got a pretty big impact. And it's not just you and me. We got Jenni Donohoo on the show. What's up,
Hey,
Jenni Donohoo? What's going on?
welcome,
Hi,
Jenny.
thanks for having me.
Now, Jenni, you're in Cape Coral, Florida. That just sounds beautiful. It sounds like there's no state taxes. It sounds like the
Hmm.
margaritas are just a little saltier and a little sweeter. How's that new move going for you?
We love it. We've been here just under a year, but it's a wonderful community and we're very happy.
All right, help me out with my geography. I was just in Fort Lauderdale in Miami. I don't know where Cape Coral is from there. Is it near that area or not?
So in Miami, if you drove for 2 hours north, you would be in Cape Coral. So we're just about a 2 hour drive south of Tampa and north of Miami.
South of Tampa, north of Miami, and just a little bit away from the happiest place on earth, right? Because Orlando is just near everything, right?
It is, yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Eric, I know we were talking, and I kept on seeing Jenny's name on like all these articles that I had. I've been doing so much work on like collective teacher efficacy and effect sizes, and leveraging John Hattie's meta-analysis, and I just kept on seeing Jenny's name on all this research. And I was like, we got to get her on the show. And I think, Jenny, I probably saw you on Facebook or something, or saw you on like on the gram or something. The gram, Eric, that's what the kids are calling the Insta or the
Sorry,
gram,
Jenny. Sorry, Jenny.
Instagram. I got teenagers. What are you gonna do? And I was like, I got to reach out to Jenny. And Jenny said, yes. I'm ecstatic. So it's like we get to like put theory together and like to practice together, Jenny, and like talk about one
It's
of
the
my favorite.
it's the praxis,
It's the
right? It's the praxis
praxis. It's
between
the
theory and
praxis.
action, right, Jenny?
Did you know that's my company name?
I did.
Yes, we did. We did.
Okay,
We
all
try, try,
right.
try to weave that in. See, that's how
Too
we
good to
roll in
be
the
a
community connection.
coincidence.
Jenny, we're a sucker for an origin story. Tell us a little bit about your origin story, from little Jenny to Jenny now, and what inspired you to do this work, and how is it that you're helping educators across America? So tell it. Let's talk. Let's start from start.
Interesting. I could go way back, but when you said little Jenny, I grew up in a home that didn't necessarily value education very
Mm,
much. And I wasn't encouraged to continue past high school. And I was working for a while in a Burger King, and not that there's anything with working in a Burger King, but at 3 a.m. when you're scraping cheese out
Well,
of the microwave oven and taking apart the milkshake machine, you're starting to wonder at the age of 21, is there something more for me? And that's where I was at. And luckily, I could apply for university as a mature student, and my previous grades didn't matter because they would not have gotten me into
mm,
university. And then I started to apply myself and realized that if I did the reading, if I attended classes, I mean, as a mature student, you'd think people would realize that earlier on as a
mm,
as a student in their career in school, but I didn't. I didn't realize that if I applied myself, that I was capable of achieving. So that's kind of the beginning of me as a student. I think teachers mostly follow a different path. I'm not sure many of them that I've talked to have been successful students, and
mm.
that's what piques their interest or sparks them into becoming an educator. And then there are some that I come across who have had similar experiences. In high school, I remember a guidance counselor knocking on the door and suggesting that I drop, and this is going to age me, but data processing class and go into home economics instead.
Oh.
And it was suggested that I become a hairdresser, and I think that that's a wonderful profession as well. But I think that there was low expectations of what I was capable of achieving.
Jenny, where did you grow up?
In Canada, in Windsor, Ontario.
Wow. And I thought Canada was like a progressive, like educational, country system. Man, come on, Windsor, what's going on? Man, I don't know. I grew up in Tennessee. Eric grew up in New Hampshire, so we love the origin stories. Do you go back to Canada from time to time?
Actually, I'll be back this weekend. It's my mom's birthday, and I'm heading heading over there to visit. We're right across the border from Detroit, Michigan.
Sure, sure. Well,
Happy birthday, Jenny's mom.
yeah, absolutely. And go back to that Burger King, right? What's
Yeah,
up?
yeah.
Ask for
Jenny,
that Royale.
There.
Yeah,
what took
man,
you from
that's
Burger King? What took you from Burger King to writing books on collective efficacy? That's a huge leap. Bridge that gap for us.
Yeah, so I put myself through university and became a teacher and absolutely loved it. I taught grade 7 most of my career. Really just felt that that was where I belonged. I met my husband teaching in the classroom next to me, and he was a special education teacher, and he slowly encouraged me, you know, to get my master's. Hey, you should go back to school and get your master's. And then he saw posting for a district office support for new teacher induction. You'd be really good at this, Jenny. Why don't you apply? And then a few years later, you should get your PhD. And he supported me through all of that. And then he encouraged me to step out. You could do this work. You could
mm,
have a wider reach. And it was a risk because you leave a job, you leave a pension, you leave security. But it was really Jim, my husband, who encouraged me to write my first book, to continue with my education, and to try to make a difference on a wider scale.
It's always nice when someone else sees something that we might not even see in ourselves. That's what a leader is, I think. It's bringing out in other people those qualities and encouraging them to do more.
Absolutely. And I think that when you say that, I'll just come back to the idea of efficacy. That's one of the sources of efficacy, when somebody that you trust and find credible convinces you that you can. That's one
mm.
of the 4 sources that influences efficacy judgments. And I think Jim did that for me.
Hmm.
I hope you remind him every day, right? You remind him every day of that, right?
No, but maybe after this podcast, I'll have to go
Uh,
and thank him.
Oh, well, thanks, man, thanks. Well, okay, so let's jump into this. All right, so Jenny, I gotta share this with you. I gotta get on my soapbox venting a little bit. Eric, just bear with me over here, okay? So I was on the old Facebook, right? I was on the old Facebook, and I saw a very popular school leader talk about um, how he does not think that teachers should collaborate under any kind of guide or guise or any kind of direction unless they want to. And that he thinks that his teacher teams need to be prepping as much as possible, and if they're professionals, we should just leave them alone and treat them as such. And I just could not help. Usually I don't say anything because God knows I got enough things to worry about, but I felt compelled to call this leader out because I just felt it was malpractice. Now, I was trying to be civil, Dr. Worster. We got a guest coming up about civility, so I tried to be very, very civil on it and
right.
lay out the actual facts, the research that kind of talks about that paradox of autonomy, that loose and tight kind of aspect, but also with the parameters of that professional collegiality and that collective teacher efficacy. And in one of my rants and raves, some of the folks were like, "Yeah, this is what we need. We need to be left the hell alone and just let us do what we got to do as teachers and just let us plan and prep and we don't have time for this." And it was just fascinated the um just oh, I'm trying to mince my words here. I'm trying to be ignorance. The ignorance, and I mean that with all due respect. The ignorance of some of those comments, and I felt bad. Actually felt bad for those folks because in our profession, Jenny, we're supposed to make all professions possible, right? We're the professions that make all professions possible. And if we're slinging malfeasance, if we're slinging practices that are actually antiquated and contrary to helping all students learn, then we're doomed. We're doomed. So, Jenny, anyway, that's my rant. That's my rave. I don't know, Eric. I could be wrong. Jenny, help us out over here.
Well, I think that teachers often are resistant to collaborate or to engage in professional development because they haven't experienced really impactful or rewarding or useful professional learning or collaboration. They have good reasons. I think that professional development is far, it's missed the mark. And it hasn't necessarily honored their professionalism as well. And I think that teachers should have some autonomy, but within a framework of, this, we know what works. There's expectations that we're going to be continuous learners because, I mean, doctors are always learning, right? I hear that analogy a lot. If,
Mm,
if I went to a doctor who hadn't learned anything in 20 years, that's just silly and nonsense. And as professionals, it's our responsibility to continuously learn and try things. And I think that if teachers experienced collaboration where it made a difference in their classroom, if it made a difference for them, their professional well-being, they'd be more likely to want to engage in that kind of collaboration. But we don't see necessarily a lot of that happening in schools.
mm.
Jenni, you have a book recently out, I think, on collective efficacy. We talk about this term a lot, or we hear this term a lot. Can you please define for us what is meant by collective efficacy?
Absolutely. First and foremost, it's a belief. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and it's a belief that teachers in a given school make an educational impact over and above the impact of students' homes and communities. And that definition comes from Megan Shannon Moran. It's a belief, a conviction that what we do together is going to matter. And I hear a lot of misconceptions. I see a lot of social media posts. One of my favorites was a game of human hungry, hungry hippos with the caption, "What a great way to build efficacy." And I
Sounds
don't think,
fun.
yeah, it
I,
looked like fun too. I
I'd
mean,
probably pull a hamstring doing something like that.
I could imagine myself on one of those roller boards, with the laundry basket in the center of the gym trying to get those balls. And it'd be a lot of laughter, and there's nothing wrong with community building in the workplace. I'm not knocking it for that, but it was the caption, "What a great way to build efficacy."
Mm,
And so I think it's like many other educational concepts, misunderstood. Um, and so I'm concerned about that.
mm.
So, what would
I'm,
it look like in
I,
action?
yeah.
So, if I were to go into a school, how would I know that they were promoting collective efficacy?
Well, I think collective efficacy reveals itself in many ways. First and foremost, through our everyday conversations in which we're attributing causes for success and failure to the things that are within our control as opposed to out there. We wouldn't hear people talking about or making excuses. In many places I go, I hear we can't expect much from those students because of where they come from. That's
Mm,
not collective efficacy. Collective efficacy is understanding that the strategies we're using, and whether it be our school improvement plans or our everyday interactions with our students, that we have the capability to influence positive change,
Mm,
positive improvements. Efficacy beliefs reveal themselves through our motivations as well, through the types of goals we set. If we were to walk into a school and see some, high challenging goals, then we know that there's some efficacy there. The lower the efficacy, the less goals people set because they don't believe their efforts will amount to much. So they,
mm,
they tend not to set very high goals. And I think efficacy beliefs reveal themselves also in the type of tasks that teachers assign to students. When we have a sense of efficacy, we tend to provide students with more rigorous tasks because we have that unwavering belief in their ability to achieve at a high standard. And we also convey that through our verbal and nonverbal messages with our students.
mm. Jenni, let me ask this. I'm I wouldn't say I'm a fans of because fan is like short for fanatical, right? So I wouldn't say I'm fanatical about any researcher but I do find John Hattie's meta-analysis work quite interesting. And I do leverage that from time to time. Now we can argue, and Eric, this is a good question about the what meta-analysis actually means. Is it reliable? Is it like we can unpack what that means? But it's pretty clear that 1.57 effect size for collective teacher efficacy is pretty damn big. But then there's another one of his factors, whether it's visible learning or whether it's factor on teacher estimates of student achievement, which I think is higher at some point or somewhere. It was actually higher. So I look at it and I'm like, okay, so just bear with me here. I've been in a lot of schools too, Jenny, and I think there's two types of schools and two types of extremes, and then some factors in between. I think there's either an all school or an if school. And when you go to an all school, there really aren't any excuses. It's like, I don't care what race you are, what income level you are, what immigrant status you are, whether mom and dad's at home, whether I got long term subs or whether I got 20-year vets. We don't care because we've got this all culture that all kids are going to learn because of us. Roll up your sleeves. We want the smoke, bring them on. And those schools do really, really well. And then you've got the if school, and that's like kids can learn if mom and dad's at home. Kids can learn if there's English. Kids can learn if we had better teachers. Kids could learn if we had better curriculum. Kids could learn if the admin would just leave us alone. If. And so I see teacher estimates of student achievement high and the collective impact of their work. And I see it more as just the raw thinking. I see it as like evidence of those beliefs, collective evidence of those beliefs. That's the difference between those extremes of all schools and if schools. So, Jenny, I don't know if you can kind of unpack that a little bit. Am I right? Am I wrong? Are you seeing the same thing?
I agree with you. And so John Hattie's visible learning database, I'm a fan as well. And I've been fortunate. I've had opportunities to collaborate with John, write with John, present with John.
Mm,
The white book that was published in 2009, which most people are very familiar with
right.
the cover, you won't find collective efficacy in that book.
Mm-mm.
The first meta-analysis was published in 2011. And that's where that effect size of 1.57 comes from. There have been a few studies published since then, and the effect size currently of collective efficacy is 1.34.
Mm.
I saw
Still pretty high.
it's
Still
still
pretty
the
high.
highest, and I was with John Hattie in Michigan a couple months ago, and I checked with him, is it still number one? And he reassured me that it was.
Okay.
Since the 2011, it's been number one. The teacher estimates of student achievement, I think sometimes has been misreported. And I don't know how much detail, and I think you guys can cut this out if you don't want
Oh,
this.
no. Bring on the detail. People need to know.
Okay, so recently, and if I find it a bit frustrating, there was some posts that collective efficacy has an effect size of 1.01.
Mm.
So I don't know if you know that John has an online database. It's called Visible Learning MetaX. It's the most recent updates, and you can go there and you can drill down. You can see the influences by different categories, and then you can find collective efficacy. And sure enough, it was reported at 1.01. So I emailed John and I said, oh, has it dropped? Is there another meta-analysis? And the fact is that it's inaccurate. The meta-analysis, the fifth one that was added recently, should not be there. And
Mm.
John Hattie confirmed that with me, and he's confirmed it publicly on a couple blogs. I could send you a
Mm.
link if you're interested. And I asked him, when will it be updated? And he said, unfortunately, it's every 6 months they update that. So I'm frustrated because I've seen a lot of people out there presenting on the topic with reporting out that it's dropped or that it's no longer number one when that isn't necessarily the case.
Well,
Jenny,
it's still higher than teacher pay teachers, though, correct? I mean, I just want to make.
Yes.
can we talk? We were banding around some numbers 1.57, 1.01 effect size. For people who don't know what that means, what is effect size? What is anything over one? What does that mean? What is it measuring? And then we might go a little bit deeper into the meta-analysis. But what's effect size?
Okay, so an effect size is what statisticians will calculate when they want to draw comparisons across time and over studies. And an effect size of 0 would demonstrate that that particular influence had no impact whatsoever on student achievement. Some things actually have negative effects. And I don't think that would come to surprise to your listeners, things that might negatively influence student achievement. And some of those things would be mobility.
Absenteeism.
Yeah, when they have to move schools over the course of a year, when they're bullied, when they're absent, those sort of things, when they feel disliked by their teacher.
Mm.
But most of the things in John Hattie's database, 95% of the influences fall above 0. And so the question becomes, what matters most? So by general rule, what researchers will say is an effect size of zero, or sorry, zero, above zero, like 0.20, would have some likelihood, a small potential to influence student achievement.
Mm.
An effect size of 0.40 has greater influence on student achievement. The larger the effect size, the greater the magnitude of that particular influence. And anything by rule of thumb above 0.80 has potential to incredibly accelerate student achievement. And John Hattie's research, he uses the term the hinge point
Mm.
for anything above 0.40.
Hmm.
And the significance of that is that it represents a year's growth for a year's input. So if students are going to be with us, his argument is if 95% of the influences fall above zero, we have to set the mark at that hinge point because that guarantees us a year's growth for a year's input.
Got it.
Does that make sense, Dr. Worcester? You knew that already.
I was
Come on,
going to
man.
say he knew that. I had the feeling when he
Ah!
did that for the
So,
lesson.
so Jenny, when we talk about meta-analysis, because it is interesting, right, how it's shifted from 1.57 to 1.3 something, and then I know you just said it's not 1.0, whatever it's on the webpage. Nathaniel and I were talking about just how some studies are conducted and how some are well conducted and well created and others are not. And sometimes in a meta-analysis, those two groups can get lumped together and skew your results, correct?
Well, I don't know if I would say skew your results. From what I've read and from the conversations I've had with John Hattie, and I think that this a lot of this is articulated in the front matter of his books. What I have read is that the meta-analysis, if we're looking at a hierarchy of research and a hierarchy of, I guess, of effectiveness or
Mm.
standards around, oh, I'm losing the word that I'm looking for. Reliability, I
Yep.
guess,
Sure.
that the meta-analysis sits at the top of that pyramid. At the bottom, you'd have something like an expert opinion, but based on the sheer number of studies that are involved in a meta-analysis, and there has to be a lot of research on that topic, that we can consider it very reliable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that meta-analysis is not a bunch of people that are sort of interested in it, um, just writing random whatever articles on it, and then they're saying, hey, because 1,000 people wrote an article on this, it must be effective. I think often that actually happens with some of the zeitgeist things that happen in pedagogical circles,
Yes, I agree with that.
yeah, right. And so I think that's why I like as a practitioner of pedagogy and as being a professional, I just blows my mind that this isn't standard operating procedure in our admin schools and our teacher trainer schools. Like it's like, and so I'm having some cognitive dissonance just trying to figure out like why is this not ubiquitous in our culture, and why are if and I get it that second order change is hard, and we've got this one room schoolhouse mentality oftentimes the kind of like the if, but we should be, our leaders out there should be fighting like hell to make sure that they're creating these cultures where this is happening. And so Eric and I have this ongoing, I wouldn't call it a debate, Dr. Worster. I would just call it more of like, I don't know, style or whatever, where on one leadership style, a leader would hire the absolute best people they can find, um, give them the parameters, and then trust that judgment and that autonomy to go forth and do what they need to do and get good results. Um, as a leader, I've never really. I'm always like, we have to create the team, the team, the team, the team, the team, and I get it. That's not for everybody. I can understand that, and in some capacities, some people would only want to work with a team to be doing those things. Um, you know, Doc, I know we talk a lot about this, Eric. With that understanding of collective teacher efficacy, where is that now in your um, leadership kind of like like understanding? Is this something that you would still commit to if you were to start a brand new school, or would factors be different now than they were from back in the day? I don't know. That's kind of all over the place, Doc. But what are your thoughts on that?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you, bro.
If I think collective teacher efficacy is
Yeah,
important,
yeah.
yes, I do think collective teacher efficacy is important. Viewers, It's important.
It's important, but how do you cultivate that? I think, Eric, is what I'm looking at.
Jenni, I'm gonna let you answer that, and then I'll think about that too. Jenni, what do you?
Okay. One of the things I just want to loop back to, if it's okay, is coming back to the effect sizes.
Yeah.
Something John said to me once really resonated, and I think it might be important for the viewers to think about is um, the effect sizes show what currently is, not what could be.
Mm.
And I think that's important to think about. And I just want to unpack that a little bit around the notion of feedback.
Mm,
Feedback doesn't have a very high effect, and I think it's because we don't do it really well.
That's a good
And I
point.
think if we got better with feedback, it could potentially um, be number one.
Yeah, I think grades are not feedback. We had
No,
Gusky on. It's a
they're
great,
kind of feedback.
they're kind of feedback, but
They don't really give you much information. They give you something. They don't give you nothing. They give you something depending on how that grading is done. But they generally don't help you get better, which is what
okay.
grading should be doing.
Yeah, yeah, I
Jenni,
agree
great.
with that.
So the question is like, how do we understand what something is? Because feedback done ineffectively will not make much of a difference versus feedback done effectively can have a huge, I believe, can have a huge impact on a student's trajectory.
Me too. So it's getting to the story behind the numbers. That's what I hear John Hattie talk about a lot as well. And so what he has started to do in Visible Learning MetaX is break feedback down.
Mm,
Before it was just reported out, and as you know, it can be it has a lot of variability. There's a lot of studies, and some can have a negative impact. So when we think of those effect sizes, we're looking at an average based on hundreds of studies involving thousands of students. So to get to that idea behind that meta-analysis, we really do have to understand more about those individual studies. And so he's starting to break it down and report it out based on different kinds of feedback. So that's one thing. If your listeners wanted to go check out MetaX, they'll see that that's happening. But your question to me,
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
yeah, okay. Your question was around how do you influence efficacy?
there you go.
So there's kind of, to me, two parts to that answer. And one is understanding Albert Bandura's sources of efficacy. And those are the things that have shown through research in psychology are the things that they're based on the efficacy beliefs are future oriented beliefs that are based on past experiences.
Mm,
And we draw upon four sources of efficacy experiences when we're forming those beliefs. One I've already mentioned, and it was when somebody persuades us. Um, the biggest one or the most potent source of efficacy shaping information is when we have succeeded in the past.
mm,
Those successful
Mhm.
performance accomplishments go a long way. But the key is we have to succeed at the things we find challenging in order for it to increase our efficacy. If we succeed at only easy tasks, it does nothing to boost our efficacy. And the other key thing there with those mastery experiences is that we have to interpret our success through a growth mindset. That is, we have to make the link between what it is we did, the strategies we use, the types of supports we provided to students, and the resulting outcomes.
I like that.
that's
Nathaniel,
pretty good.
that sounds
Well,
great. Don't you
yeah.
think, Nathaniel?
Well,
That sounds great.
it does. I haven't really thought of. I'm familiar with Bandura's work, but I like those perspectives. I'm all about evidence, Jenny. I'm a sucker for receipts. I think in another life I was an accountant, even though I'm really crappy with numbers. But I need evidence. Like it's and Jenny was like, it's one thing. Everybody believes all kids can learn in September on the
Mm.
first day of school, right? It's in February the 13th, right? It's in like right before those state tests that we've got to check that belief. Like we're all high collective teacher efficacy like at the beginning of the school year or even if individual efficacy. And I just think going back to kind of like my question with Eric is that I just think school leaders have a place to play to create a habit of collective teacher efficacy. I think it's one thing to say, go forth and be efficacious. I'm surprised I said that word correct. It's another thing to say, give me receipts that this work is happening. So if I've got a team, if I've got my third grade team and we're saying, like we've read Bandor, we've read John Hattie, we've got Donahoo's book, and we're going to be the most CTE exemplary team on the world, and we've got that rah stuff going on, and then we give that first assessment and we have a 30% pass rate, and then we're like, screw this, I'm going back to teacher paid teachers. These kids can't do this. And I just think there's got to be some kind of like coaching support, some kind of admin support to be able to say, let's look at this standard together. Let's make sure that we have the agency, to be able to actually teach, right? This standard. Let's look at the needs of our students. Let's create an assessment to kind of backfill so we have some backwards design so we know where we're getting to, so we know what that end result is. The work is challenging, we're pushing each other, and maybe we hit that SMART goal, maybe we don't hit that SMART goal, but at least we've got evidence of our impact. I think what happens, Jenny, is it's one thing to believe, it's another thing to bear receipts. So I want to pick your brain about that. Am I off on that thinking?
No, absolutely. When you started talking, I wrote down a note. I said, you were talking about you need evidence of impact. So do school teams in order for their
Mhm.
efficacy to be enhanced. But in absence of that evidence of impact, because that could happen, we could work real hard and we might not meet the goal. We might be disappointed with the results. Um, Another way that principals or school leaders could build a team's efficacy is orchestrate opportunities for them to see others who are like them meet with success. So that's another source of efficacy. It's called vicarious experiences when we see
Hmm.
other teams in the school that might be having success with groups of students, where we see maybe a neighboring school that's similar demographically that's doing better than us. The key in order to, I guess, tap into the vicarious nature of an efficacy shaping source is that people have to see those that are succeeding as like them or similar to them in some ways. We'll dismiss it if a school isn't like us. Those kids don't look like
Hmm.
kids. I don't,
Yep.
it doesn't look like I have those kinds of resources. That classroom looks nothing like mine. But when we see similarity and people that are making it happen, our efficacy is enhanced that way. So I think it becomes important for school leaders to share, change the culture. Teachers don't want to brag, right? We've got to change that so that they can share what's happening, share the good things that are, as a result of their collective work.
I agree. Teachers do not like to brag. I worked with a teacher team in Arkansas, and it was they were just the most humble, just the most like. I was like, girl, you got like 100% on this, and she was like, I just got good kids. God bless me with some good kids, and I'm like, no, you don't. I like they're hard kids. Like you did a great job. And we need to share that impact, right? Look what you did, and you because you use these strategies, because you use this evidence, right? And look, your team, can learn from you. So it's like, yeah, I think I see that a lot in our profession. We're so humble, you know what I
But it's
mean?
also
But
incumbent on our leaders to acknowledge those things,
sure.
brag about that.
Yeah.
Nathaniel,
Absolutely.
Nathaniel, I'm
And
gonna tee up. I'm gonna tee you up one more time, pal.
let's do it, buddy.
I think that last question was great.
Oh, great. There you go. All right. So Jenny, but well, before I get into to my little thing, let me ask you something. Let's say we're a school on a mountain, and we ain't got no one to go. We ain't got no field trips, right? All we got is us. Ain't no one coming. Ain't no money for Jenny to come. Ain't no money for Nathaniel to come. All we got, and we barely got YouTube. So like, but we heard that CTE is really, really great. I want to get into those habits a little bit more. All right. So let's say we're all we got. What are those habits when it comes to ensuring all students are going to learn at high levels? What habits do you got? I got a couple. I want to hear what you got, and then we'll bounce some ideas back and forth.
Okay. So one thought that came to mind when you posed that question was when we think of vicarious experiences, it doesn't have to be direct observation. There's
Mm,
other ways, but I get how you're
you
saying
get it.
stuff. We really want to get to what is the bottom line, what's the nitty gritty. And I think one of the best things that teams can do is to create shared goals. Like goal setting is so important. Vivian Robinson's meta-analysis demonstrates that it is the highest impact leadership practice that directly influences student achievement. But I find that we don't necessarily take the time to understand why goal setting is important or how it works to take advantage of it as a leadership practice.
Mm.
I remember being a classroom teacher and being invited to be part of the school improvement planning committee. We set a SMART goal for numeracy literacy pathways. And I don't remember my principal sharing those goals widely with others. I don't remember him referring back to them when making decisions about school improvement. I don't remember him trying to create a discrepancy around what is that goal and where are we currently. And so I think there's a lot to be said there. And I think that if we help teachers create mastery type goals and not necessarily focus so much on performance goals,
Mm.
in my experience, that's made a big difference. People are often surprised to know that performance goals, things like those SMART goals that we focus so widely on in our school improvement work, in Hattie's database, that's one of the things that actually show a negative influence on student achievement. But
Mm.
yet we keep focusing on SMART goals. And so there's a lot of research out there on the difference between SMART or performance goals and mastery or also called learning goals. And so a lot
Mm.
of my work in teacher teams is helping teachers build those learning goals where they own it. They feel a sense of, when we say, teachers might not necessarily be really motivated to do this collaborative work at the beginning of
Hmm.
our conversation. When they have those shared mastery goals, in my experience, it really does provide the motivation for them to
Yeah.
really dig in.
And those mastery goals are on standards, not coverage,
That's
correct? I mean, like,
absolutely.
I don't know if I don't know if pacing has ever equated to proficiency.
Mhm.
My wife will give me 57 chores to do on the weekend. I'm only going to get three done really, really well. Now, I got those three done really, really well. I washed the dishes, I changed the litter box, and I washed the car. But those other 54,
Or
like, I don't know. I was exposed to them, right? But I didn't quite get that done. And I think teachers are afraid of quality versus quantity. And that's not a teacher's fault. That's an admin, that's a district level, that's a state issue
Mhm.
where, going back to we had Larry Ainsworth on our show. Excellent guest. I mean, we have, third grade, 5,722 standards that we've got to expose our kids to or whatever it is. Crazy, right? Um, let's do 10 really, really well and be the world's best on these 10. Let's talk about mastery on these 10. And those, Jenny, I mean, will probably lend themselves pretty well to the others. I mean, right? I mean, is that kind of where you're getting at?
Absolutely. And consider the idea, you just used the word mastery again. Those mastery, remember the number one source of efficacy is mastery.
Yes, mastery.
And what the research clearly demonstrates is when the mastery goal is met, the performance goal will take care of itself.
like that.
Mm.
Hmm.
So I've been working on this for a long time, trying to help teams. 'Cause that's what I do. I coach teams across the country. And I was trying to figure out like what is the difference between a good team and a great team? Jim Collins wrote that book. I think it was Jim Collins, from good to great. And
Yeah,
I love that, and I'm a sucker for an acronym. So here's what I've been trying to do. I don't know if it's been helpful or not, but like I was looking at all the teams that I've worked at that have been great with their efforts for collective teacher efficacy. And I'm going to give you this, Jenny. I'm going to share this with you. I don't know if I've shared this on the show or not, but this is one of the things that I use with teams just to help them get to that mastery goal section. So the first thing we do, Eric, is that we start with a standard. Like, once again, what standard do we want to be the world's best at for our kids? Whether it's the REALS acronym or an Century Mastery Standard. Like, if we're a team, let's be the world's best at understanding what that standard means. So S stands for standard. We're working our way up. And then we go to that backwards design. We're gonna test the test. We're gonna create that test. We're gonna create something tangible to assess our students with that's gonna prove whether or not we have mastery of that standard. I'm talking a 5-question common formative assessment that we all create, that we have ownership over, Jenny, so that at least we could have some kind of evidence of our impact at the end of the day. From there, we're going to align strategy. So the A stands for align strategies. And so if Jenni's got this fantastic research-based graphic organizer that she wants to use for the standard, Jenni, we're all going to use that. If Eric's got some
Mhm.
vocabulary that he wants to be able to, that we're going to do, great. I think that we need to be able to really highlight this verb and this standard, and we're going to, so let's use these activities and make sure all of our kids have access to those great activities. So the A stands for like aligning the activities. And then we're going to go to enrichment. What's the highest level rigor we can get out of this standard? I don't think we talk about enrichment enough, Jenni. I think we always just teach to the average, but I want teams when they're working on that collective teacher efficacy mindset to be able to think about the highest order rigor possible that we can expose kids to. And even if kids don't get that standard, at least we tried, and at least we let them struggle a little bit so that we can get to that point. But we know that kids are going to struggle. I get it. Kids aren't going to learn it the first time that we teach it. And so the R stands for to remember to remediate. So how do we differentiate by process, by product, by content, by learning environment to help those kids need? And that's not outsourcing our remediation. That's owning our remediation and intervention. I'm not going to wait for the sped teacher to pull kids out to intervene. I want to own that, right? Let's own that. And then finally, G, let's create a mastery goal. So I was like, that works. So if I could give some kind of like framework to create these habits of collective teacher efficacy, I mean, that's what I see great teams do. And it's we need habits. We need to be able to have that kind of coaching, Eric, that you talked about, to know that we're not just, believing all kids can learn at high levels in August and September, but in February and March, and so we need some habits and some routines and some structure, some cueing systems, if you will, that James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits to be able to get that. So any insights on that, Jenni? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I love and agree with everything you said, and that's been my experience with teams that are successful and productive and satisfying, where they engage in that kind of, it would be what Judith Warren Little would call joint work.
Mm,
She wrote a study more than 30 years ago examining teams. She was the dean at the University of California at Berkeley, and her research for decades was, to what degree do teachers' out of class collaborations account for positive consequences within the classroom? And that level of joint work is where people are engaged in the kind of thing you just described, where they're perhaps also sharing some of the struggles that they're having,
yeah.
and they're also putting ideas on the table for scrutiny in search of a better way
Hmm.
together to problem solve, to make improvements on some of those adaptive challenges. One of the things that I really have found useful when getting teams to that joint work are protocols.
Hmm.
And there's some powerful protocols that people can find online for examining student work. People can find protocols. I used one recently with a team. They were examining assessments, and teacher would bring their own assessments to the table, and a protocol works through the different stages to look at rigor and to look at, from the student's perspective, what would they be thinking as they're working through this.
Mm,
How is it related to the standard? What would students know and be able to do if they demonstrated? And through that dialogue and collaborative work, people improve their assessments. The protocol allows you to separate person from practice,
hmm.
because when we first engage in protocols, we usually will bring a generic assessment or a piece of generic student work, so nobody has to feel that uh, fear of judgment, negative judgment. But once they've experienced it, then it's never failed. Somebody always says, you know what, I'll bring my assessment next time, or I'll bring my student work. So my go-to are protocols to build in that sense of psychological safety. And then eventually you don't need the protocol because the team's operating at that level of efficiency, and they found value in the work that we want them to find.
Love
Dr.
it.
Worcester,
Yeah,
Jenni said psychological safety. I did not say psychological
yeah,
safety.
got
There you
it.
go.
I want subtract points from you. Jenni, I have a final two-parter because we are getting near the end here. First, do you have any great words as we begin a new school year? Do you have any great words of encouragement for all of our educators and educational leaders out there? That's part one.
Well, I just know that teachers can make a huge difference, right? In my own life, and in I know that in my work in schools that I see teachers making a difference all the time in their own students' lives. And I just hope they realize that they have that power to change the trajectory of a student's future. And I think that's why a lot of people get into this work, but I just hope they don't lose sight of that they can make a huge difference.
Absolutely, they can. And part two, to help teachers have a better year, where can they find your work?
Oh, well, thank you. My latest book was published through Solution Tree with a co-author, Glenn Forbes. He's a principal that I met doing this work, and he's got a lot of practical advice that he's contributed to the book, Collective Impact. Again, available through Solution Tree, and anyone can find me online on my website, jennidonohoo.com.
Great. Thanks, Jenni.
All right. Jenni, thanks so much. Jenni, who can I turn to when it comes to collective teacher efficacy? You're the one. Did you like that, Eric? That was a little 80s
That was
reference.
I did like that. That was pretty good.
Well, I could also leave my phone number for the audience. If
There
anyone
we go.
wants to contact me, they can find me at 867-5309.
Yeah, look at that. See, I told you, Jenni, this was going to be the best podcast you've ever been on. I told you. I told you. See, no other podcast did a reference with that. I guarantee.
Did they?
No, that's me.
See,
All right. All
there we
right.
go with that one. Jenni, thank you very much for bringing best and better and evidence-based practices to our profession. I hope those Facebook haters that were just crushing me, they're going to get this podcast. Listen, we love you out there. We understand there's no time. We understand that you've been jaded. We understand that PLC has been bastardized and all kinds of stuff. But I'm telling you guys, just lean into the research, lean into the evidence, right? There's no teacher out there, God bless you, that has all the superpowers, all the training, all the magical whatever to be everything for all kids. It's too hard. It's Hollywood. It doesn't exist. Roll up your sleeves, get together with your team, get evidence of your impact. It's not about perfection, right, Jenni? But
No.
process, man, process. So that's my 2 cents. What are you going to do with that? So with that, everybody, thank you for joining us on the Community Connection. We hope that this episode has just changed your trajectory on getting receipts of your impact.